My dad could have bailed me out, but he wanted to teach me a lesson. Father was telling me if you don't change your lifestyle, you're gonna end up in jail, dead, or broke.
Charlamagne built one of the biggest platforms in black media, but his rise always had a shadow hanging over it. What looked like success on the surface came with moments that nearly shut everything down, and his path was far from smooth or glamorous.
Me and my wife hung out one Saturday night and she got sloppy drunk and passed out of my mama's house, and I got that.
Back in 2001, something happened that had nothing to do with radio, fame, or industry politics, but everything to do with how his story would be remembered. A 15-year-old girl, Jessica Reed, alleged that Charlamagne, who was around 22 or 23 at the time, drugged and assaulted her at a party in Charleston, South Carolina. Her account was detailed and specific. She said she was given a drink that had been tampered with at a gathering at the Short Stay Naval Recreational Center. Not long after, her body gave out, and she collapsed. She later said she woke up realizing something serious had happened to her. She went to the hospital and reported it to the police. A medical exam came back with findings consistent with sexual activity. Charlamagne was arrested on June 22nd, 2001.
Why am I giving myself donkey today? Because I feel stupid. But I am just now realizing that a lot of us men in America have been raised on culture.
And charged with criminal sexual conduct with a minor in the second degree. His version of events was completely different. He said he left the party early and had no physical contact with her at all. DNA testing reportedly showed no semen on swabs and no usable evidence from fingernail scrapings. The main charge was dropped, but he later accepted a plea deal on a misdemeanor charge of contributing to the delinquency of a minor for providing alcohol and drugs, receiving 3 years of probation. On paper, the case was closed. Simple as that.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I got this girl real drunk, and
that sentence sounds a little fishy.
But in real life, things were just getting started, and the story didn't stay buried. As the years went on, Charlamagne built The Breakfast Club into a massive platform, interviewing major figures, challenging rappers, and shaping conversations across the culture. But as his influence grew, so did the attention on his past, creeping back into public view like something unfinished. In 2015, an old clip from the Brilliant Idiots podcast resurfaced and started spreading online fast. In it, Charlamagne talked about putting Spanish fly, described as an aphrodisiac, into a woman's drink and having sex with her while she was barely coherent. He later addressed it, saying the story involved his wife, that it was consensual, and apologized for how it sounded. Still, the clip hit people hard, especially when placed next to the 2001 case.
I've mainly left the charges conversation alone with regard to Charlamagne.
And not everyone felt the explanation cleared things up. Then another moment resurfaced, this time from The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne spoke about the first time he had sex with his now wife, saying she had been drinking, and he didn't hold back on the details. He even called his wife live on air, and she denied anything non-consensual happened.
And I've had the documents and I've had the police paperwork for years. And the reason I've left it alone was mostly because I didn't want it to contribute to the pile-on.
Then, in a move that caught attention, he gave himself Donkey of the Day for those comments, a segment usually aimed at others he criticizes publicly. Some people saw that as him taking accountability, owning the moment in real time. Others felt it was a strategic move, a way to stay ahead of the backlash and control the narrative before it spun out of his hands.
You was on the air for weeks talking about Mr. C and what he had going on. Nobody sent you a cease and desist.
For Jessica Reed, the situation looked very different. From her perspective, this was someone with millions of listeners and major corporate support who, in her view, had never fully answered for what she accused him of. In 2018, she attempted to have the criminal case reopened, but a prosecutor confirmed that would not happen due to the plea deal and statute of limitations. A petition calling for Charlamagne's removal from The Breakfast Club gained nearly 20,000 signatures, but iHeartMedia did not take action, and the show continued without interruption. Then in 2022, Reed filed a civil lawsuit alleging assault and battery. Charlamagne's legal team challenged it throughout the process. In November 2024,
when you was going at Funk Flex for the non-charge that he got with regard to him and his wife, Nobody said you were a cease and desist.
A judge dismissed the case based on the statute of limitations, closing that legal chapter 23 years after the original incident. His team released a statement emphasizing that he had cooperated with authorities and maintained he would not accept responsibility for something he says he did not do. Legally, he came out on top each time, but public opinion does not follow courtroom rules.
You from the Wendy Williams school of the messiness. You can't act funny when people want to talk about your personal messiness.
The conversation kept evolving as more voices stepped in. Tasha K gave Reed a full platform to tell her story in detail, and the interview spread widely, reaching people who had never heard about the case before. At the same time, clips of Charlamagne continued circulating, keeping both sides of the story in the spotlight. Then Ebro Darden from Hot 97 entered the discussion with a more measured approach.
I was seeing all these tweets about Beanie Siegel dissing Jay. The first tweet I saw was from Fabulous, and Fabulous was like, y'all never thought I'd see the day when Beanie Siegel dissed Jay-Z, and I was like, what?
He had reportedly held onto documents for years and chose his timing carefully, speaking out when the conversation was already heating up. According to Ebro, the turning point came when Charlamagne allegedly began sending cease and desist letters to people discussing the case publicly. For Ebro, that crossed a line, especially given Charlamagne's long-standing reputation for speaking openly about others' controversies without holding back.
I remember tweeting out that I got fired after 6-7 months of being at 100.3 The Beat, and all the blogs started running with, did Jay-Z get Charlamagne Tha God fired?
That contrast became a major talking point. Charlamagne had built a brand on unfiltered commentary, calling people out and digging into their toughest moments, whether on The Breakfast Club or during earlier radio days. Now, with attention turning toward him, critics question whether the same energy applied.
Really gonna get caught up in this radio, radio star, and I'm putting star in air quotes, lifestyle. Am I really gonna get caught up in the women?
Each time the story resurfaced, a new wave of listeners discovered it for the first time. And by the mid-2020s, the version of Charlamagne the public saw was shaped not just by his success, but by a past that continued to follow him, refusing to stay quiet. The mental health advocate, the best-selling author, the platform builder, the man telling black men to go to therapy.
I asked her, I said, did you know Dad was going through all of this? And she said, I thought he was playing crazy to get a check.
All of that existed at the same time as the version from 2001, the version from those podcast clips, and the version accused of trying to shut down conversations with legal pressure. Those versions did not sit neatly together, and people in the industry started noticing the tension behind the success.
The issue is domestic violence.
Yep,
The issue is exactly what I just said about, men not going to do the proper work on
When
them.
The Breakfast Club launched in 2010, Charlamagne was not stepping in as some instant success story. He came in with a past full of setbacks, having been fired from 4 radio stations across 2 different states. Before that, he moved to New York and worked with Wendy Williams for over a year without a paycheck, just a place to stay, and the belief that being close to the spotlight would eventually open doors.
They're dealing with a lot of pain and a lot of hurt and unhealed trauma, and they're projecting that pain and that hurt on the other people.
That gamble eventually paid off, but it took years of setbacks, rebuilds, and hard lessons before things clicked. Today, the show reaches over 8 million listeners every month and is syndicated on more than 100 stations. It even made it into the Radio Hall of Fame. By 2020, Charlamagne had become a voice so influential that presidential candidates were making time to sit down with him. But that rise came with scars that never fully faded.
He's the greatest radio personality of my lifetime.
Right.
So it's like him talking on a mic, he's mastered it.
One of the most defining setbacks happened during his time at 100.3 The Beat in Philadelphia.
My debates are about art. If you call me and you tell me shit like Andrew's a racist, he's a bigot, you're not gonna ever get me to buy into that.
He had only been there for about 6 or 7 months, but things were starting to take shape. He had already put down a deposit on a townhouse in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Him and his wife had packed everything up, cleaned out their place, and had their belongings ready to move. Then came the Beanie Siegel interview. At the time, Beanie had serious issues with Jay-Z, and Charlamagne gave him the mic and let him speak freely. Beanie went off for 30 to 40 minutes straight. The interview blew up online that Thursday night, replayed again Friday morning, and by Monday, everything changed. Charlamagne walked into work like any other day, only to be called into the office and told the station was moving in a different direction. No long explanation, no warning, just like that, it was over. He never directly claimed anyone pulled strings behind the scenes, but the timing had people connecting dots.
My most valuable, my most powerful, my most accomplished asset I own.
That period hit hard. Being unemployed again, back in the same environment he had once tried to escape, not knowing if radio would give him another shot, that pressure started building in a real way. What used to feel like background stress turned into something louder, something harder to ignore. By 2015 or 2016, he made the decision to start therapy, not because everything had collapsed again, but because he saw patterns in himself he could not ignore.
Charlamagne, you're not gonna get it because I own this.
He looked in the mirror and saw his father's habit staring back at him. He had married his high school sweetheart, Jessica Gadsden, in 2014, someone who had been with him before any fame, who drove him to his first internship when his license was suspended, who stood by him while they both worked regular jobs trying to figure life out. And despite all that,
my muse forever. That has been the person who's constantly made me want to be the best version of myself, even when I wasn't the best version of myself.
He admitted he was still being unfaithful, repeating cycles he had grown up around. Therapy forced him to confront things he had buried for years, and those sessions started pulling up truths he had avoided.
Father was telling me, if you don't change your lifestyle, you're gonna end up in jail, dead, or broken.
Then came a moment that shifted everything. During Thanksgiving week, the same time he released his book Shook One, and the same week a young cousin died by suicide, his father finally opened up after several attempts to reach him. What he shared completely changed how Charlamagne saw his own upbringing. His father revealed that decades earlier, he had attempted to take his own life, that he had been in therapy multiple times a week and had been on numerous medications for his mental health. All of this had been kept hidden the entire time Charlamagne was growing up, never once discussed.
I had a male role model in my father, but the problem with my father was he wasn't practicing what he was preaching. So, you have to be about action.
When Charlamagne asked his mother about it, her reaction made it clear just how much had been kept quiet in their household. For years, there had been a silent struggle happening behind the scenes, a man battling his own issues while trying to guide his son at the same time. That revelation did not erase the contradictions, but it gave them context he never had before.
When I broke for good, and I was just like, you know what? If I can't beat him, join.
And it became a driving force behind his push into mental health advocacy. He launched the Mental Wealth Alliance with a goal of connecting thousands of Black and brown individuals with free therapy. He also founded the Black Effect podcast network under iHeartMedia, creating a space designed to amplify Black voices in podcasting. On top of that, he released multiple New York Times best-selling books focused on anxiety.
And I remember watching Tyler Perry on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And I remember watching him cry over an older woman who molested.
Accountability and self-awareness in a public world that watches everything. By December 2025, he secured a reported $200 million extension deal with iHeartMedia, locking in his role as a major force in Black media. But even with all that success, the contradictions became harder to ignore.
I remember thinking to myself, what's wrong with him? Because the way we rationalized it in our mind is like when you were young, you just used to talk about it like it was a sexual encounter.
When a major rapper's situation started dominating headlines, Charlamagne appeared on The View and gave an answer that caught people off guard. Instead of focusing directly on the situation, he spoke more broadly about systemic issues, unhealed trauma, toxic masculinity, and how pain gets projected onto others. Some listeners felt that response was too soft, especially given how direct he had been with others in the past. The reaction came fast and loud.
Start going to therapy and you start peeling back, the layers of that trauma. You start realizing, oh, this is why I am the way I am in regards to pleasing people.
People who had seen him go all in on artists and celebrities for years started questioning why that same energy did not show up in this moment. That gap between his past approach and this response became another layer in the conversation, adding even more pressure to a public image that was already being pulled in different directions. The Kendrick and Andrew Schultz situation only added more pressure to everything already surrounding Charlamagne.
Not to.
Your dad could have bailed you out.
My dad could have bailed me out, but he wanted to teach
He
me.
and Schultz had been co-hosting The Brilliant Idiots for over a decade, and that kind of partnership runs deep, especially when business and friendship are tied together. But when tension sparked involving Kendrick Lamar and Schultz, connected to comments Schultz had made about black women,
He wanted me to learn from my mistakes. So he let me sit in there for 45 days.
people were watching closely to see how Charlamagne would respond. Instead of stepping in with the same sharp cultural critique that built his name, he stood firmly beside his co-host and defended him. He gave Schultz space on the platform to explain his side and shape the narrative, but didn't press him the way audiences were used to seeing.
It was a wake-up call, but it wasn't the wake-up call. It was more like I woke up, but then I hit
The
snooze.
same intensity he had brought to calling out others just wasn't there this time, and that difference stood out immediately. Listeners picked up on what felt like a double standard right away. This was someone who had previously gone hard at Post Malone, calling him a culture vulture, contributing to a period that Post himself later described as a downward spiral. There was no hesitation back then, no soft edges, just direct criticism. But with Schultz, his podcast partner and business connection, the tone shifted. The energy was different, more protective, more measured, and people noticed that contrast without needing it explained. Then Joe Budden stepped into the conversation and he came prepared. Joe had built his own lane in hip-hop media, creating an independent platform where his voice carried serious weight. That position gave him room to critique Charlamagne in a way that hit differently. Joe's main point was simple but sharp. He questioned whether Charlamagne's messaging about ownership in the culture fully lined up with reality. Why? Because the Black Effect podcast network operates under iHeartMedia, not as a fully independent platform owned outright by Charlamagne. That argument spread quickly. For some, it raised real questions about how messages of independence land when they are still tied to major corporations. For others, it didn't take away from what Charlamagne had built, but it added another layer to how his success was viewed. Fair or not, that critique stuck. Even with a reported $200 million deal reinforcing his position, the conversation didn't just disappear. It followed him, adding to a growing list of contradictions people were already crossing. Through all of that noise, one thing has remained steady: his foundation at home, his marriage, his family, his 4 daughters, and his wife, who has been there since before any fame or spotlight, have stayed intact. That part of his life has been the constant while everything else shifted around him. That through line matters because it connects back to where everything started. A kid from Monk's Corner trying to figure out what manhood looked like, growing up in an environment where the example in front of him was complicated from the start. Leonard Larry McKelvey was born on June 29, 1978 in Charleston, South Carolina, and raised in Monk's Corner, a small rural town about 35 miles away. His father, Larry Thomas McKelvey, delivered strong warnings about street life, telling his son that path would lead to jail, death, or struggle. But at the same time, his father was reportedly involved in that same lifestyle, creating a gap between what was said and what was actually done. That contradiction did not go unnoticed, and it shaped how young Leonard started viewing the world around him. That do as I say, not as I do dynamic creates a certain mindset. It teaches a kid to stop listening to words and start watching actions instead. And Leonard paid close attention to everything happening around him. His mother, Julie Ford McKelvey, brought a completely different influence into his life. She was an English teacher, a Jehovah's Witness, and someone who pushed him toward education and structure. She placed him in advanced classes from an early age, trying to keep him on a focused path. But even that came with challenges. Being one of only a few black students in advanced classes surrounded mostly by white classmates made him stand out in ways that weren't always positive. It created tension not just in school, but even within his own circles, where that difference sometimes made him a target. That mix of pressure, contradiction, and environment started shaping the mindset he would carry into later life, long before the fame, the platform, and the public spotlight ever came into the picture. The moment school let out, everything changed for him. His cousins from his father's side saw him differently. Glasses, fanny pack, hanging with white kids, and they pressed him for it hard. It wasn't just jokes either. It got physical. After taking hits over and over, young Leonard made a choice a lot of kids in that environment make. If you can't fight it, blend into it. The glasses broke one last time, the fanny pack disappeared, and a new version of him stepped in. First it was jokes, being the class clown, but then it started shifting into something more serious. School slipped fast, summer school back-to-back, getting held back in 9th grade, then getting expelled. He ended up at Stratford High, where his mother worked, a last attempt to keep him on track, but even that didn't hold. Around that time, he experienced something he didn't fully understand or talk about for years. As a child, he went through a situation involving inappropriate behavior from an older individual in his extended family. At that age, he didn't have the words or understanding for it, so he brushed it off and kept moving. It wasn't until years later, seeing someone else speak publicly about a similar experience, that something clicked for him. Therapy later helped him connect how that moment shaped parts of his thinking, especially around silence, discomfort, and trying to keep others satisfied to avoid conflict. As a teenager, that confusion turned into action. He got caught up in the streets, arrested twice for possession with intent to distribute. That lifestyle was all around him, and it felt normal, even as the risks kept stacking up. Then came the arrest that hit different. He was in a car when a shooting happened. Even though he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, everyone there was charged. He was taken out of school in cuffs, right in front of everyone. His father could have stepped in right away, but didn't. He left him there for 45 days, and that moment stuck heavy. His mother eventually showed up with the bail money, and his father gave him one more chance. Not a free pass, not a reset, just one real shot to figure it out. He took that chance, but not all at once, not overnight. He went right back into the same environment, the same people, the same habits. It wasn't instant change. It took another wake-up call, a drug bust involving him and 16 of his friends that landed them all in a holding tank. That moment hit different. Sitting there, sick to his stomach, he physically threw up from the reality of being right back where he started. That was the point where everything finally clicked. Not the arrest, not getting expelled, not the warnings, but that exact moment in that cell. After that, he started moving different. He enrolled in night school, finished what he had left, and began working whatever jobs he could find: telemarketing, a clothing store in the mall, landscaping, fast food, warehouse shifts, just grinding and stacking small wins. Somewhere in the middle of all that, he walked into a recording studio and met a local DJ named Willie Will. He asked him straight up how to get into radio, no hesitation. Willie told him to get an internship, so that's exactly what he did in 1998, and that decision changed everything. That was the start of a new path, but the fire from where he came from never fully disappeared. And anyone who's followed his story knows, something like that doesn't just fade away. If you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it.